I'm pretty bullish that we reach 100K before the end of the year.
Today I sit down with crypto veteran and partner at Asymmetric Capital, Dan Held,
Opportunity size, I think, is the biggest opportunity ever to exist in crypto.
as he gives his Bitcoin outlook for 2024.
Going into September and October, I think we're definitely probably going to be above 100K by then.
His Bitcoin price prediction for 2025.
Next year is where all the fireworks happen if you look at historical cycles.
And what comes next?
The amount of capital flows we're talking about are unfathomable.
And watch today's whole video. Dan shares his top 5 Bitcoin ecosystem coins. Give me your top 5 Bitcoin coins you're looking at for this bull run, and I'm not talking about the blue chips. Also when to sell, but what is your profit-taking strategy? Click the like button to support me, and let's start, Dan, with your background.
Yeah, so my background very early in crypto back in the 2013 era is when I built my first product. I actually got into it in 2011. If you look at when I created my Mt. Gox account, technically in December 2011. Now, of course, like everyone else, I didn't go out and buy as many Bitcoin as I could. It was still kind of weird, hard to use back then. I didn't really understand it. So really got seriously involved in 2013, I think is a good way of putting it. I lived in San Francisco at the time, and the Bitcoin meetup was just a dozen people. Brian and Fred from Coinbase, Charlie Lee, Jen McCaleb from Ripple Stellar, Jesse Powell. And then when March 2013 hit, that's when I built my first product. So in this space, built a product back then that got bought by blockchain.com, was the first PM there. My last corporate gig, I was CMO over at Kraken, so built out the marketing team from 2 to 30. And then over the last 2 years, been doing fractional CMO work, and currently am doing that. Plus, I've got my fund, Asymmetric Bitcoin DeFi Venture Fund. We invest in early stage Bitcoin DeFi deals. So we are a classic VC fund structure, not a liquid fund. And it's been fun being on the other side of things. I've been an operator my whole time in crypto and in tech, but I've never been on the other side, the investing side. So with my network, with the amount of deal flow I was getting, with the unique sector of Bitcoin DeFi, it was perfect timing for me to go start this fund.
So you're a guy that's been in crypto since the beginning or close to it. What is the current state of crypto today? And for context, almost 2 years ago, easy time to buy. Markets were going down. It didn't feel right, but that's the time you should buy. We're all bullish in the long term. Where do you see crypto today?
Yeah, I mean, we're at an incredibly bullish inflection point. Not only do we have rates easing later this year, which means risk on assets will likely go higher, aka the Fed's cutting rates, which means that debt's cheaper. Also signals to the market that risk on is okay. You've got that plus potentially and most likely Trump being elected as president, and he plans on introducing sweeping changes to regulatory frameworks. So I think that if Trump gets elected, that's massively bullish the industry. Then also you have the traditional 4-year cycle. We are coming on the exciting fireworks moment in the typical Bitcoin halving cycle. So after the halving, Q4 of that year, and then Q1 of next year is when the fireworks really start to happen. It's kind of lining up quite nicely, where I think going into September and October, I think we're definitely probably going to be above 100K by then. And then, into December, January, I would guess that we've probably gone past 100K. So I'm pretty bullish that we reach 100K before the end of the year. Of course, at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville next week, supposedly Trump will be announcing that he will be buying a strategic Bitcoin reserve with the Treasury. If that occurs, we hit $100,000 in a minute. But I think, well, it's TBD on if that will happen. The rumor mills, as you probably know, you're in the know and the who's who, but that's what the rumor mills are saying. We'll see if it happens though.
And by the way, you said Bitcoin conference next week. That's this week, guys. We're recording this week
yes,
of
this week, yeah.
And does BlackRock and all these traditional finance players in the system, the first time they're selling to their clients actively, do you think this changes the 4-year cycle at all?
There's definitely huge shifts in fund flows. So previously, to go buy Bitcoin, you would have to wire your money to Coinbase, set KYC AML, and then go in an order book and buy Bitcoin. And it was really tricky, especially with your retirement account, to do that. And there are trillions of dollars in retirement accounts, probably tens of trillions. And so now people could one click buy that in their Fidelity, E-Trade, Robinhood brokerage account. That dramatically changes the game. If you look at the fund flows and the Bitcoin ETF first launched, that was huge. You've got the Ethereum ETF on the verge of being approved and live as well. So I think like both of those will bode pretty well for the industry. I do think like the amount of capital flows we're talking about are unfathomable. Like we're talking about tens of trillions of dollars of capital that previously would not have touched this industry can now flow into it with one button click. I don't think we're ready for what that means exactly, especially for an asset like Bitcoin with a fixed cap of 21 million. You can't produce any more, even if demand skyrockets. And of course, as the price goes higher, people become aware of it and then buy in anticipation of it going higher. So that viral loop, that reflexivity kicks in. So we've never seen that before where Larry Fink and TradFi folks are like, this is okay to buy, and here's an easy way to buy it. That didn't exist in previous cycles. So yeah, I don't think we're going to follow the same trajectory from here on out. I don't think it's going to be that standard 4-year cycle. It'll be different. I don't know how different it'll be, but it'll be different.
When you're investing in BRC20 coins, that's coins on the Bitcoin ecosystem, how do you think about it? What do you look for?
Great question. So the fund, we focus on early stage venture, and these are deals that are early stage venture that also have like a token warrant. Usually those aren't BRC20 tokens. For example, one of our investments is in Liquidium. Liquidium is a place where you can borrow Bitcoin using your ordinal as collateral. They just listed their token, the Liquidium token, and it's on Runes. So some of these governance tokens are on BRC20 or on Runes. So from that perspective, the fund would hold BRC20 or Rune assets because of our early stage investment in them, and this represents like a governance token. In terms of BRC20s, I think the market, when Runes came out, Runes were kind of like, oh, this is like more efficient. It's a new hot narrative. Runes is sexier than BRC20. It's just like a technical term versus Runes sound cool. I think they were a little overhyped, and we saw that reflected in Runes prices after they launched. BRC20, we've seen Ordi, Sats, kind of the first ones to break a billion. Those still retain quite a bit of volume and quite a bit of daily trading. I think we'll see those probably surge back in the bull run. These are sort of like your blue chip, which is really weird to say, but like blue chip BRC20s. I think those will do quite well. I think the governance tokens on Rune, like Rune's governance tokens, like the Liquidium one, it'll be interesting to see how they perform. But yeah, I think we'll see, in a bull run like this, you typically see altcoins have a higher beta than Bitcoin. Some of them, of course, a lot of them go to zero over the long term. I think we'll see the same thing happen in Runes and in BRC20s and in Bitcoin NFTs, aka ordinals. If you look at, for example, the Quantum Cats collection, the Quantum Cats collection is priced at 0.3 BTC. That's held somewhat, it's gone up and down, but that's held somewhat constant since their launch. So they are holding their value in Bitcoin. The reason why I bring that up is, of course, if you can't beat the return of Bitcoin, then what are you doing in this space, right? So the beating the return of Bitcoin, I look at these, Runes, BRC20s, and ordinals. If they can't beat Bitcoin's rate of return, then you should have just held Bitcoin.
I tried to get in on the Quantum Cats thing when it launched. It sold out in point or 10 seconds or something like that. So very, definitely one of the blue chips or the growing ones in the space. To answer me this, why is the Bitcoin ecosystem going to succeed versus Solana? Like, why is it better?
I don't think it's one versus the other. I think it's a rising tide raises all ships. If you look at the demographic of the common Bitcoin owner, the common Bitcoin owner, 87% of them own another crypto asset. It's not like the Bitcoin owners are all Puritan maxis who only believe in Bitcoin. They hold a Solana and they hold Ethereum. So the idea that they would go want to speculate on top of Bitcoin with Bitcoin assets or assets on Bitcoin, I think was entirely organic. Like this is a thing that they're familiar with on Solana and Ethereum. To be clear, you can't do a lot of what you want to do, compared to Solana or Ethereum on top of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin has the most amount of value in it in terms of market capitalization. I think people forget that Bitcoin's market cap is bigger than everything else, but everything else, not just everything else, but everything else combined. So that amount of capital flowing into assets on top of Bitcoin will be massive. If you just take a small percentage of that, just a tiny, tiny percentage would be bigger than like the TVL of Ethereum. So like these things, I think a lot of people are not pricing in. And we're going to see a lot of, I'm looking at these projects and I'm investing in these projects right now. And I was very bullish on ordinals as soon as they came out, and I've been bullish on L2s for years. Obviously, been advising, the Trust Machine folks. They're connected with Stacks. So I've been seeing this all play out over the years. I left Kraken, and if you look at the TechCrunch article that reports on me leaving Kraken, I lay out my thesis for Bitcoin in July of 20, Bitcoin DeFi in July of 2022. So I've been waiting for this moment, anticipating it for a long time. And I think a lot of people are sleeping on it. You've got the ETH maxi sleeping on it, and you've got the Bitcoin maxi sleeping on it, and it's happening. You don't even have to take my word for it. Just go look on chain and see what's going on. But yeah, the Bitcoin L2s, I think, are also a big component here. Bitcoin L1, you can't do all the cool stuff you can do on Ethereum and Solana. It's not a virtual machine. But on a Bitcoin L2, you can do that. So the incentive to bridge your Bitcoin or use an L2 is actually far higher than it is on Ethereum, because with Ethereum, it's just more of a cost function, cost and speed. Whereas on Bitcoin, yeah, your L2 gives you lower fees to move Bitcoin around, and it's faster, but it also gives you more expressibility. So like it's more expressive. You can do smart contracts, AMMs. You can do really expressive things. A lot of these Bitcoin L2s are EVM or SVM, so that people can copy paste their Solana or Ethereum dApp over. So opportunity size, I think, is the biggest opportunity ever to exist in crypto. Um, will people want to do degen, DeFi stuff on Bitcoin like the other chains? I think so. I think they're the same people. People aren't all that different. A lot of people are really nostalgic too for the Bitcoin blockchain, right? Like most people's first coin is Bitcoin. And to do other cool things on top of Bitcoin, they may stick around there. So I don't think it kills Ethereum or Solana, but it certainly takes a little bit of that market share away. And we've already seen that occur on the NFT side of things. There are days where there is more trading volume in Bitcoin NFTs than Ethereum NFTs, which is wild. So Bitcoin on quite a few occasions, like almost I would say like a third or half of the time, is the number one NFT chain by volume, which is quite wild because ordinals only came out a year and a half ago during a bear market with very, very limited wallet support. For example, like you can't use your Ledger or Trezor and hold these in an easy fashion. So I'm very, very bullish in this space.
Dan, why are you bullish on Quantum Cats? Obviously, we know Udi, people like him, big backer. Some people hate him, but many, many people like him. What is Quantum Cats? Why are you a believer?
Yeah, I think Udi and Eric, they're both brilliant founders. Same with the rest of the team. The team is all super sharp. I've kind of been there since almost the beginning of when they created the Taproot Wizards company and started to assemble a team to go not only build quantum cats, but also build and think through how do we push the narrative forward of building on Bitcoin. They've done a great job with that. OP Cat, the Bitcoin soft fork proposal, the BIP, basically that was memed into existence from Quantum Cats. Quantum Cats, for those who don't know, are an NFT collection of these kind of funky looking cats. And they're one of the most popular collections in the ordinals world, but they represent something much deeper, which is promoting the culture of Bitcoin development to go build and implement changes into Bitcoin that will allow us to do all the things that were promised when we first conceptualized how Bitcoin can work. OpCat is an op code that was originally in Bitcoin, and then Satoshi disabled it because he wasn't sure of all the implications of it. It's actually only like 20 lines of code, really short, simple. It's been implemented on Bitcoin Cash and Liquid Bitcoin L2 for over 5 years. So it's been thoroughly studied. A lot of the core developers are on board politically. And so Quantum Cats in the team, Taproot Wizards, that owns the Quantum Cats collection, they've used this to promote this software proposal, and it looks like it's got a good chance of being implemented, which will be crazy if OpCat gets implemented. That means that we can have trustless bridging for Bitcoin L2s, which would be incredible. Just a small change can allow for things like that and other really sophisticated things that allow us to build this layered system as originally intended. Bitcoin and the Bitcoin Cash civil war, the Bitcoin community decided that we would scale in layers. And so Lightning, Liquid, and other forms of L2s were created, but having a trustless bridge to that L2 is still a problem. So this trustless bridging would solve a critical problem for L2s to explode and be adopted. So I'm really excited about that. The team has, I think, memed this into existence, and we all owe them a hat tip if this does get implemented. And if that does, Bitcoin will be able to absorb even more market share into the Bitcoin DeFi world. Um, if we look at, Taproot Wizards as a whole, I think their overall objective is to look and promote developing on top of Bitcoin. They've also got some exciting things in the pipeline that I can't talk about, but you should definitely have Udi on sometime.
We've had
For
him
those
on.
who
We'll
don't,
definitely have him on again. Great guest.
for those who don't know, Udi, Eric, they like to troll people. They're really, really good at that. I love them because they troll Bitcoin people and they troll Ethereum people equally. So I think they play an important critical role in the ecosystem of being that critical voice on both sides.
Dan, you're in the trenches. I want to zoom out to Bitcoin coins, not so much NFTs, but coins. If you would, give me your top five Bitcoin coins you're looking at for this bull run. And I'm not talking about the blue chips. I know Stacks is going to do great, but what else is there?
Yeah, you talking like L2s, DApps, whatnot.
Yes,
There's a saying that I forget who said it. I think it's Charlie Munger. He's like, "Don't tell me your opinion, tell me what's in your portfolio." So I think that would probably be my
please.
best representation. Asymmetric, we invested in Mezzo. We invested in Build on Bitcoin Bob, and we invested in BitLayer. Those are three L2s that we very much believe in and we think will do very, very well this cycle. Those have various token generation events at a future date. It's hard to say exactly when will be long. Each one has their own. But those would be, I think, pretty interesting. The teams behind them are super solid. I've been in the space 12 years. I know what good founders look like, and I think we're going to see some really cool things come out of them. Some of the dApps that we invested in that I think, but and all these will have a token, by the way. One is Liquidium. So Liquidium token is live as of today. Liquidium lets you lend and borrow using your ordinal as collateral. I think their future focus will be kind of like thinking about being a DEX or really leaning into that lending and borrowing market. Liquidium's metrics are all public. You can take a look at them on their website. They've done incredibly well over the last year and a half, as a lot of people who own an ordinal want to borrow Bitcoin using the ordinal as collateral. And a lot of people want to eventually earn, or they want to earn yield on their Bitcoin and then maybe own that ordinal. They'll lend the Bitcoin to that ordinal holder. Uh, their metrics have been skyrocketing. And then SatFlow is looking to be kind of like a Blur plus, kind of like a Blur plus Flashbots. So they built one of the first MEV tools on Bitcoin to allow people to visually see MEV and then go snipe transactions that are in the mempool. The Bitcoin mempool is the place where all the Bitcoin transactions are sitting, waiting to get confirmed. And so that's kind of like your final order book in a way would be there. So SatFlow, we think, also has a very interesting approach towards like building a DEX, starting with this kind of MEV sniping tool. So we love them as a founder. They're also coming out with a token. So those would be like five of, we felt very strong when we invested in these companies at Asymmetric. Um, a few other ones like that are not asymmetric. I always think fund first, by the way. So everything that I approach investment wise, I approach with the fund. But for example, some of these were before I had the fund, or they weren't allowing our minimum fund check size. So we had to go smaller. So I angeled into them. You've got like Arch Network. I think Arch is really cool. Multicoin led the round, took almost the entire round, and is the Multicoin's only Bitcoin DeFi investment. Arch, so there's something called a meta protocol, which not many people are aware of. Ordinals are a meta protocol. It's not a change to Bitcoin, and it's not an L2. It's like you and I are wearing augmented reality glasses running the same set of software. And we're looking at the Bitcoin blockchain and we are interpreting things that are happening there and prescribing it our own meaning, which is really cool. It's a very exotic thing that Casey Rodarmore, the founder of Ordinals, came up with. Basically, it's this another shared belief system network on top of Bitcoin, but not an L2. It's quite fascinating. So there are other versions of that. So ordinal represents ordering theory, and then you've got like BRC20, runes, atomicals. Those are protocol, like meta protocol standards. So I think with like Arch, you're going to see another version of like a meta protocol that's really interesting. So there's a couple of these out there. There's Arch, and then also I'd be remiss not to name the one that we invested in at Asymmetric, Fractal. Fractal is being developed by Unisat, one of the most popular ordinals wallets out there. So both Arch and Fractal, I think, are really cool meta protocol plays. Ultimately, the best way to tap into all of the potential TVL for Bitcoin is if you're on layer one. Now, granted, transaction fees are high and you're somewhat limited in what you can do, but I think these meta protocols will thrive alongside L2s. I don't think it's a winner take all of either, and I also don't think it's a cannibalization of one or the other. Fees, based on how much transaction fees are, how much demand there is for block space, we'll see dynamic pricing of these, and we'll see certain activities eventually fall in the L2 realm versus meta protocol. For example, let's say quantum cats become like the Picassos, the punks. People don't mind paying $100 to move it on chain. That would be okay. But let's say Nike wants to issue 10,000 NFTs, they might go do that on a Bitcoin L2. So it just really depends on market conditions. And I think we'll see the stratification of different asset types on different layers and also on different chains. I think Solana and Ethereum might be more palatable again for like the Nike example. You want to go issue 100,000 NFTs, that's where you go do it. And then maybe for Bitcoin, because you have to inscribe it on the Bitcoin blockchain, which is very costly, maybe that's the realm of like the finer art. Like maybe that's where kind of the finer art lives permanently because the art exists on chain, which is really cool, but it's also very expensive. There's going to be a funny side effect as well as transaction fees in Bitcoin go higher. The cost to inscribe a similar file size collection, like data size collection, would might be 10x or 100x of what it originally cost. So there is some really cool aspect of that as well, where like, for example, quantum cats to inscribe those 5 years from now might cost you 100x of what it cost us to inscribe them because transaction fees are that high. So I think that leads to some really interesting dynamics between NFT collections of both L1 versus L2 and for L1 versus L1.
Dan, I have two final questions because I know you're a busy guy. First one, I'm talking about you as an angel investor, so not the fund, but what is your profit-taking strategy for these altcoins, not Bitcoin?
That's a good question. I mean, ultimately, any trading strategy is you have to first think about what do I want or what do I need or why am I doing this? For example, if you're selling any coin or any investment, it's, well, why are you selling? And you're like, well, to take profit. It's like, well, what are you taking profit for? Like, are you trying to buy a home with your significant other? Are you trying to buy a car? Are you trying to get out of debt? Which, by the way, you probably shouldn't be trading if you're in debt. But there's a lot of degens who are going to watch this. So, I would say it really depends on what you're looking for. I would start with what you want and back into a trading strategy that makes sense for that. Hypothetically, here's like a good example. Let's say I want to buy $1 million house and I've got a certain number of Bitcoin and these alts and private equity and Kraken. How do I go think about liquidating those? You would take like some of your longest held positions, also if they're very in the money, and you think about, well, if I sold this, how much would I regret it if I did? Or how much better would I feel if I could buy that house with cash? Or trading isn't just about profit because I've been in this space for almost 12 years and I've hodled the whole way, and that's a pretty extreme way of living. Not many people have lived that way. And some people want the peace of mind of like they own their home and they can touch it, right? So you have to think very strategically about what are you doing this for? Like, what's your exit strategy? And like, what's the number and why? Cool, you took out $1 million. Let's say you didn't have the house in mind. Where were you going to go put it? S&P 500? Not going to keep it in cash. And then when you put in the S&P 500, you're like, okay, is this going to beat inflation, non-CPI inflation? Do I really think that this is a better investment than let's say you don't need the money. Objectively, it'd be better to hold it in Bitcoin or these tokens and hold on for longer and maybe sell the next cycle. So it really depends on what you're selling for. But entering a trading strategy before the bull market begins is critical. I think that is probably the number one mistake that people make is they go, yeah, I'll sell some in the bull run, but then they never tell themselves, okay, at what price exactly will I sell a certain percent? You have to make up your mind before the bull run occurs, and that's what the best traders in the world do. They have an exit strategy before things start moving. If things start moving and you start to build out your strategy, you're constantly going to move it forward. You're going to be like, oh, well, I'm just waiting for another 3x. I think, again, looking at your goals and then backing into what assets you'd want to sell and why you're making those decisions, and then putting together something you're going to stick to. I don't think anyone can perfectly time the top or bottom. And so ultimately, it's about, well, can you hit your goals and do you not feel guilt one way or the other? Also, don't sell everything. I've seen this happen in the earliest days of Bitcoin where these guys in the 2013 through 15 era, I remember one guy, he had 1,000 Bitcoin, good friend of mine. And Bitcoin, when it hit $1,000 again in 2017, he sold all of it because he was a millionaire and he had never grown up with money. And so hitting $1 million for him was a really significant moment. And he didn't really need the money. He just felt like he should. He wasn't a true believer as well. So like when Bitcoin came back to the price that it was at in 2013, he's like, cool, I'm selling. But with that, he missed out on 20x gains from there. He could have been worth 20 million. So yeah, really, never sell all of it. I think that's that's my number one piece of advice.
Sound advice. And I just add on, just like you dollar cost average in, if you're going to take profits, DCEA out because you don't want to sell at 1,000 and it goes to 20. Dan, final question. You said at the beginning of this interview, 100K potentially by the end of this year. What is your Bitcoin price prediction for 2025? Your base case, your bear case, and your bull case.
Base case, I think 150. You said base case, bull case, and bear case.
Yes.
Bear would be under 100, and then bull would be over 250. I mean, that would be quite wild. I mean, next year is where all the fireworks happen. If you look at historical cycles, if Trump announced that there's going to be a strategic reserve, if he gets elected, I think 250 above that seems possible. This would be unprecedented, including like you've got ETF flows as well and investment advisors across the world recommending that people buy Bitcoin in their retirement account. Over 250 is possible, but I think base case is 150.
Dan, thank you so much for sharing your time. Links for all your stuff down below. Final thoughts for the Altcoin Daily Army.
Don't fade Bitcoin DeFi. Don't be like the Ethereum maxis, Bitcoin maxis. Bitcoin DeFi is one of the greatest opportunities ever to exist in this space. Go check it out, download a wallet, go play around with it. I think you'll like what you see.